256 billion pounds of soybeans. That's what came out of American soil this year, turned into cooking oil, soy milk, and tofu inside mega factories that never stop running. A single seed becomes 3 completely different products. Today, we step inside that machine, the combines, the crush plants, the assembly lines, to see exactly how it happens. Look out the window of a small plane over central Illinois on a clear October morning, and the ground below doesn't look like farmland. It looks like a quilt. Gold squares, brown squares, pale tan rectangles stretching flat to every horizon, broken only by grain elevators standing up like white fingers pointing at the sky. In 2024, American farmers grew 4.46 billion bushels of soybeans off that quilt, a record that had never been touched before, spread across 86 million acres of Corn Belt dirt. Start with one county to understand the scale. McLean County, Illinois, flat, fertile, dead center of the state, produced 22.6 million bushels of soybeans in 2024 alone. One county. Illinois itself hit a record that same year, 688 million bushels, enough that lawmakers made the soybean the state's official bean, effective January 1, 2026. State Senator Doris Turner called Decatur, Illinois, the soybean capital of the world. She wasn't exaggerating. But before any of that matters, someone has to plant the seed. Every spring, starting in late April, Corn Belt farmers work a planting window tighter than it looks. In Iowa, the optimal window runs from April 15th to June 15th. Miss it and yield drops. The planter bar rolling across these fields can stretch more than 60 feet wide, a steel arm folding out behind the tractor like a giant wing, guided by GPS precise enough to place each row within an inch of where it belongs. Seeds drop at a rate that would make your head spin, into soil rotated from corn the year before, because soybeans fix nitrogen into the ground that feeds next year's corn. Behind the planter, the black dirt closes back over each row in a straight, unbroken line that runs to the edge of the horizon. Through the summer, the fields fill in gold. Small white flowers open along each stalk, then fall away, as pods take their place, bulging with 3 or 4 beans each. Farmers watch from above now, flying drones that pull satellite data to spot stress in the canopy before it becomes a problem on the ground. By early September, the pods yellow, the beans rattle like tiny dice when shaken, the fields shift from deep green to a dry, papery brown, and the whole Corn Belt holds its breath. Mid-September, the combines roll out, and this is where the real scale hits you. In a few minutes, you'll see the machine that swallows soybeans by the semi-truckload, and the price tag will surprise you. The machine doing most of this work is the John Deere X9 1100. The average price on the market runs $686,622. It produces 690 horsepower, more than some locomotives. The grain tank holds 460 bushels, and the unloading auger can empty that tank into a moving grain cart in about 90 seconds, without the combine ever slowing down. At full speed, the X9 1100 harvests 7,200 bushels an hour, enough to fill 7 semi-trailers every 60 minutes. A well-equipped crew covers roughly 9 acres an hour, the header stripping pods at ground level, the threshing system separating bean from shell, a golden stream pouring up into the tank. The header alone is wider than a 2-lane road. The cab sits so high you need a ladder to reach it, and inside, the operator watches screens tracking yield, moisture, and GPS position, while the machine adjusts itself for wetter beans in a low spot or drier ones on a ridge. Twin 24-inch rotors and the widest combine body on the market give it 45% more harvesting capacity than the prior generation, while burning 20% less fuel. Harvest runs from mid-September through late November. For 6 weeks, every farmer in Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana is racing to get beans out of the field, and the roads fill with semi-trucks hauling grain in a loop that doesn't stop for weekends or weather. Hit subscribe, because coming up, you'll see beans get weighed, tested, and dumped into towers taller than most buildings in town. Which brings us to the grain elevator, and why the wait there can feel longer than the harvest itself. During peak season, a central Illinois elevator might have trucks lined up 4 hours deep. Some waits hit 8. The truck rolls onto a scale. A probe pulls a sample for moisture and protein testing, then the driver pulls forward to the dump pit, a grated floor that swallows the load with a sound like rushing water. a bucket elevator, a continuous chain of small cups, carries the beans straight up inside a towering concrete silo. A scale ticket prints. The farmer gets paid. The beans sit in that silo for days, weeks, sometimes months, while the elevator operator watches prices and waits for a crush plant. Next, we're stepping inside the plant that never turns off, where a bean stops being a bean forever. The crush plant is where the soybean stops being a seed and becomes something else entirely. The biggest soybean processing hub in America sits in Decatur, Illinois, home to ADM's North American headquarters. A sprawling complex of silos, smokestacks, and steel processing towers, so large it has its own skyline, one of the largest integrated agricultural processing operations on Earth. The East plant alone accounts for roughly 13% of all U.S. annual soybean crushing volume. Trucks idle in line outside the gate at every hour of the day, and rail cars arrive around the clock, every day of the year, in a rhythm that never breaks. The plant never stops. Here's how the beans move through it. First, cleaning. Screens shake out dirt and stones. Magnets pull metal. Next, cracking. Roller mills break each bean into 4 to 6 pieces, loosening the hull without grinding it to powder. Then dehulling. An aspirator blows air through the material, floating the light hulls away and letting the heavier bean pieces fall through. Hulls that later go back into the meal as fiber, or get sold as feed on their own. The next step uses a chemical most people have never heard of, and it's in nearly every bottle of oil in your pantry. The bean pieces are conditioned with steam in slow-turning cylindrical cookers, softening the oil cells without cooking the protein, then pressed by flaking rolls, 2 heavy steel drums spinning just fractions of an inch apart, into a sheet about the thickness of a piece of paper, thin enough to rupture nearly every oil cell so the oil can actually be extracted. The flakes drop into an extractor the length of a football field, a long, sealed vessel where hexane, a petroleum-based solvent, washes through in a countercurrent flow, dissolving the oil out of the flake as it travels. What comes out one end is a mixture of oil and solvent. What comes out the other is a mat of defatted flakes holding less than 1% oil. Evaporators boil the hexane back off inside stainless steel columns that rise several stories into the air, capture and recycle nearly all of it, and what's left behind is crude soybean oil, dark, cloudy, amber, smelling faintly of the beans it came from. The defatted flakes travel into a desolventizer toaster, a massive rotating drum stacked with trays, using steam to strip out any remaining hexane and toast the material into soybean meal. Dry, tan, granular, smelling faintly nutty, running 47 to 48% protein by weight. From one 60-pound bushel, a crush plant pulls about 11 to 12 pounds of crude oil and 47 to 48 pounds of meal. Every pound gets used. Nothing about the bean goes to waste. The industry isn't standing still, and it isn't staying inside Illinois either. Iowa harvested 597 million bushels of soybeans in 2024. Indiana brought in another 341 million. Both states are now seeing the same kind of investment that built Decatur into a giant. In July 2026, ADM announced expansions at 4 more U.S. crush facilities: Frankfort, Indiana, Deerfield, Missouri, Lincoln, Nebraska, and Spiritwood, North Dakota, adding 700,000 metric tons of annual crush capacity, equivalent to 25 million more bushels of demand a year. $500 million in new factories are being built right now, and it's not for food. The Green Bison soy processing plant in Spiritwood, North Dakota, a joint venture between ADM and Marathon Petroleum, cost about $350 million to build and opened in 2023. Its silos and processing towers rising up out of flat prairie that used to be nothing but wheat and cattle country. It processes 150,000 bushels a day, producing 600 million pounds of refined vegetable oil a year, and every single pound of it goes to one customer, Marathon Petroleum, which converts it into renewable diesel at its refinery. The entire plant exists to feed one fuel supply chain. Louis Dreyfus Company is building a new $500 million plant in Upper Sandusky, Ohio, construction that began in 2024 and stands as the single largest private investment in Wyandotte County history. When it's finished, it will crush 1.5 million metric tons of soybeans a year and produce 320,000 metric tons of edible soybean oil. And in Illinois, Incabrasa Industries opened a new $250 million processing plant in Gilman in 2026, capable of handling nearly 100 million bushels annually, doubling the company's prior capacity overnight, with new silo towers now visible for miles across flat farmland. Drive past any of these build sites right now, and the scene looks less like farm country and more like an industrial megaproject. Concrete foundations the size of city blocks, cranes lifting steel silos into place, miles of new pipeline and rail spur laid down before a single bean has ever been crushed there. Across the country, total US soybean crush capacity has grown by hundreds of millions of bushels in just the last 3 years, a build-out pace the industry hasn't seen since the 1970s, and nearly all of it is chasing the same target: renewable fuel. The reason is simple: soybean oil has two enormous markets pulling on it at the same time, and both are growing fast. The USDA projected 28.68 billion pounds of US soybean oil production for the 2024 to 2025 marketing year. About 14 billion pounds of that, roughly half, was projected to go to biofuel, biodiesel and renewable diesel burned in trucks, trains, and eventually airplanes. The other half goes to food, cooking oil, margarine, salad dressing, mayonnaise. That split is what's driving billions of dollars of new construction across the Corn Belt and beyond, and why companies like ADM and Louis Dreyfus are racing to add capacity before demand outpaces supply. Subscribe now, because what happens next splits this whole story in two. One path leads to your dinner table, the other to a fuel tank. But crude oil isn't ready for your kitchen yet. It goes through degumming, where phospholipids are pulled out and sold as lecithin for chocolate and baked goods. Bleaching, where clay strips out pigments and trace metals. And deodorization, where heat and steam vacuum away the smell and taste of the raw bean. What comes out is the neutral, pale yellow oil that fills grocery store bottles, restaurant fryers, and the base of margarine and salad dressing. AGP, Ag Processing Inc., runs 11 plants across 5 states, the largest cooperative soybean processor on Earth, owned by roughly 200,000 farmers, crushing more than 20,000 acres worth of beans every single day. Not every Illinois soybean ends up in an industrial crush plant, though. Some take a completely different road, to a small factory on the north side of Chicago. At 5438 North Broadway in Edgewater, Phoenix Bean makes tofu the way it was meant to be made. Owner Jenny Yang sources food-grade, non-GMO soybeans directly from Illinois farms, and each day the plant uses about 4,000 pounds of dry beans. One small factory, one direct supply chain from field to block. The beans soak overnight, roughly doubling in size. In the morning they're ground wet into a slurry, then boiled to eliminate compounds that would make raw soybeans hard to digest. The cooked slurry is strained through cloth. The liquid becomes soy milk. The leftover pulp becomes okara, a fiber-rich byproduct sold on its own. The soy milk moves to a coagulation tank, where nigari, a mineral salt drawn from seawater, causes the proteins to bond into curds, much like rennet in cheesemaking. The curds are ladled into cloth-lined molds and pressed, and what remains is a firm, white block of tofu, cut, packaged, and shipped to Whole Foods and Sprouts shelves nationwide. The contrast is almost hard to process. One operation running 4,000 pounds of beans a day, the other handling millions across a national network, both starting from the same Illinois soybean, both ending on the same grocery shelf, just different sections. Here's a fact that reframes the whole picture. The Illinois Soybean Association confirmed 60% of Illinois-grown soybeans are exported, and most of the rest becomes animal feed. Illinois, the largest soybean-producing state in America, generating roughly $7 billion a year from the crop, still depends on imports for most of the soy food its own residents eat. The tofu on a Chicago shelf is more likely to have come from California than from an Illinois farm 2 hours away. The state grows the crop. Someone else eats it. Jenny Yang is one of the people trying to change that. One 4,000-pound batch at a time. Proof that Illinois soybeans can travel from farm to tofu block without ever leaving the state. But the scale gap between that and the export and feed markets is enormous. What has materialized instead is the crush boom, and that's where the real momentum in this industry sits. Renewable diesel is pulling soybean oil demand upward faster than food ever did, because it produces significantly lower life cycle carbon emissions than petroleum diesel, a fact that qualifies it for federal low-carbon fuel incentives, and the reason billions are pouring into new plants right now. The meal side of the equation is just as large, even though it gets less attention. Every bushel crushed produces 47 to 48 pounds of high-protein meal that flows into poultry, hog, and cattle feed across the country and around the world. The animal protein on your dinner plate almost certainly traces back to soybean meal at some point in its life. Follow the full chain: seed to a $686,622 combine at 7,200 bushels an hour, to the elevator silo, to the ADM plant running non-stop in Decatur, to the refining line, to the coagulation tank where Jenny Yang makes tofu by hand, and you're looking at one of the most complete agricultural supply chains on Earth. One crop, multiple industries, billions of pounds. And it starts every year with a seed dropped into the ground in late April, while a farmer checks the GPS, the forecast, and the soil temperature. Now consider what it takes just to move the crop off the field. A bushel of soybeans weighs 60 pounds. A standard semi hauls about 900 bushels. Moving Illinois' 2024 crop by truck alone would take more than 760,000 truckloads. From the air, central Illinois in October looks like a slow-moving river of white and silver trailers, flowing from every direction toward the nearest elevator. County roads that sit empty in July are bumper to bumper with grain trucks in October, and local elevators post wait times on their websites the way airports post flight delays. A single 110-car unit train can carry about 440,000 bushels in one trip, roughly the same as 490 semi-loads, moving on a single track without adding a single vehicle to the highway. The big crush plants in Decatur, in Iowa, in North Dakota, are all built with direct rail access for exactly this reason. When ADM's Decatur complex needs beans, it doesn't wait for trucks lined up at the gate. It calls for a train, and a mile-long string of hopper cars rolls in. A typical Corn Belt elevator holds anywhere from 1 million to 5 million bushels inside its concrete silo complex, towers that dominate the skyline of every small town between Chicago and Des Moines. The relationship between the elevator and the crush plant runs on basis contracts and futures prices. A farmer sells beans either at harvest, taking whatever the cash price is that day, or on a forward contract signed months earlier, or by storing the beans and betting on a better price down the road. The elevator takes a storage fee and manages the logistics of getting those beans to the buyer. The crush plant, meanwhile, buys on the futures market and locks in a crush margin, the gap between what it pays for beans and what it earns back on oil and meal. When that margin is wide, plants run flat out around the clock. When it narrows, some throttle back. The 2024 crop year produced record volumes at the exact moment crush margins were being squeezed by all that new capacity coming online, a tension between supply growth and profit that's still playing out across the industry. Inside the plant, quality control never stops, running in the background of everything you've already seen. After the crude oil leaves the extractor and before it enters the refining line, it passes through a settling and filtration step that strips out the heaviest solids, fine meal particles, waxes, free fatty acids that would otherwise foul the refining process. The oil sits warm at this stage, somewhere around 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, moving through tank after tank of progressively finer filters. Cut corners here, and the plant loses oil to waste streams, and the finished product needs more bleaching clay and more time in the deodorizer to hit spec. On the meal side, the desolventizer toaster has to thread an equally narrow needle. Too much heat destroys lysine, an amino acid critical to animal growth. Too little leaves anti-nutritional factors in the meal that hurt digestibility. Operators watch moisture readings and temperature sensors in real time, adjusting on the fly. Every single shift, samples of incoming beans, cracked flakes, crude oil, and finished meal move through the plant laboratory, and the results feed straight back to the floor. The scale of the meal market alone is worth pausing on. The USDA projected the 2024 to 2025 US crush would produce roughly 50 million short tons of soybean meal, enough to fill a line of hopper cars, stretching well beyond the horizon if it all moved at once. Most of it stays domestic, feeding poultry barns, hog confinement buildings, and cattle feedlots stacked floor to ceiling with feed troughs. but a significant share moves out through the same Gulf Coast and Pacific Northwest port terminals that load whole soybeans onto container ships bound for China, this time loaded onto vessels bound for Mexico, the Philippines, and Southeast Asia. Meal doesn't get the headlines that oil does right now, but by weight, it's the bigger product, and the revenue it generates is what keeps crush plants running, even when oil margins are razor thin. Step back from the industrial side, and the picture on grocery shelves is changing just as fast. Soy milk has been sitting on shelves for decades, but the category has fractured into shelf-stable cartons, refrigerated bottles, barista blends built specifically for steaming into coffee, and organic lines that carry a real premium. Tofu has followed the same arc, moving out of niche Asian grocery aisles and into the refrigerated case at Whole Foods, Sprouts, Target, and Walmart. But that food-grade world runs on a level of traceability the commodity crush market never has to touch. A non-GMO bean, bound for a plant like Phoenix bean, has to stay identity preserved from the moment it's planted. A specific variety, kept separate from commodity beans at harvest, stored in its own dedicated bin, shipped under a contract that certifies exactly where it came from. That paperwork and separation cost more at every single step, and it's exactly what a premium food buyer is paying for. A straight line from one Illinois field to one block of tofu. Phoenix beans' 4,000 daily pounds of dry beans becomes roughly 24,000 pounds of finished tofu, the exact yield shifting with how hard the curds get pressed. Silken tofu retains more of the liquid and weighs more per pound of dry bean going in. Firm and extra firm get pressed harder in their molds, losing more whey, dropping the yield. That whey isn't wasted either. It still carries water-soluble proteins and sugars useful in other food applications, even if the volumes at a shop this size are modest. A dedicated soy milk production line runs almost the identical process: soak, grind, cook, strain, but skips the coagulation tank entirely, sending the hot soy milk straight into a blending tank where salt, sweeteners, and sometimes vitamins go in to hit a specific flavor and nutrition target. From there, it passes through a homogenizer that breaks the fat globules down small enough that the carton never separates on the shelf, then onto a filling line where it's sealed and either pasteurized for the refrigerated case or heat-treated at ultra-high temperature so it can sit unrefrigerated in a warehouse for months. The entire difference between a carton of soy milk and a block of tofu, in the end, comes down to one single step, where the nigari goes in and the curds get pressed. That same one raw material logic runs the industrial side, just at a completely different scale. A crush plant takes one 60-pound bushel and splits it into two streams, and each of those streams branches again, the oil into cooking oil, margarine, salad dressing, biofuel, industrial lubricants, the meal into poultry feed, hog feed, cattle feed, aquaculture feed, export. The hulls stripped out during dehulling go back into lower grades of meal as fiber, or get sold on their own. Even the soap stock skimmed off during refining gets sold as a lower-grade fat source for feed or industrial use. A well-run crush plant has essentially no waste stream at all. Nothing about the bean is truly thrown away. It is transformed, one fraction at a time, into a product that someone, somewhere, is buying. It is a circular economy built entirely around a single seed. That's why the economics of soybean crushing look nothing like ordinary manufacturing. A plant doesn't earn its margin on one product, but on the combined value of everything coming out the door at once. Oil trading in one giant commodity market, and meal trading in another, the two rarely moving in the same direction, both hedged simultaneously inside the same building. That complexity is exactly why the companies that dominate American soybean crushing, ADM, Cargill, Bunge, AGP, Louis Dreyfus, look less like farm belt processors and more like trading houses with a factory attached. Walk into one of their control rooms and you'll find screens tracking futures prices in Chicago, ocean freight rates out of the Gulf, and railcar positions across 3 states, all at the same time as a plant manager watches moisture readings on a desolventizer 2 floors below. They run trading desks, port terminals, rail fleets, and risk management teams that matter to the business every bit as much as the physical plants do. AGP's structure as a farmer-owned cooperative is the exception that proves the rule. Its roughly 200,000 member farmers share directly in the crushing margin, rather than simply selling their beans into it and walking away. The 2024 harvest that shattered every record, wasn't just a good year for farmers sitting in a combine cab, it was a stress test for the entire machine behind them: the combines, the elevators, the rail network, the crush plants, the food factories at the very end of the line. Record production meant record volume trying to move through infrastructure sized for an average year. Elevator wait times stretched past 8 hours in some counties. Rail cars ran short at the exact peak of harvest. Crush plants pushed to maximum utilization, trying to swallow the incoming supply. And through all of it, the system held. The beans moved. The plants ran without stopping. And by the close of the marketing year, 4.46 billion bushels had been converted into oil, meal, fuel, soy milk, tofu, and animal protein, fanning out across the country and around the world. Most shoppers pushing a cart down a grocery aisle never see any of this. They see a bottle of vegetable oil, a carton of soy milk, a block of tofu wrapped in plastic. Clean, quiet, unremarkable. They never see the 460-bushel grain tank swinging open over a cart at harvest, the mile-long string of hopper cars rolling into Decatur, the football field-length extractor washing oil out of a paper-thin flake, or the coagulation tank where a mineral salt turns liquid into curds in minutes. It is farming, it is chemistry, it is logistics on a scale most people never stop to think about, and it is one of the most complete industrial systems hiding in plain sight across the middle of the country. The seed that went into McLean County dirt in late April ended up, 6 months later, in a bottle of vegetable oil on a shelf in Atlanta, a carton of soy milk steaming into a latte in a Seattle coffee shop, a block of tofu sliced onto a plate in a Chicago restaurant, and a tank of renewable diesel burning inside a long-haul truck crossing the Nevada desert at 2 in the morning. One crop, one season, 50 different uses, all traced back to the same flat field. And next April, the planter bars roll out again across 86 million acres, and the whole machine starts over. If you enjoyed this deep dive into America's soybean industry, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss our next exploration into the giant industries powering everyday life. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.